Creative Katie, Karen Burchill here. Welcome to my version of the Index Card a Day Challenge, my Create Daily series. I am off prompt and I'm just doing a page in my quote journal, starting with the focal image, which is one of the techniques. The other technique that I'll feature is using one color with black and white to build great contrast. So I have a page here that is gessoed. And I am starting with this focal image. I cut this out of a magazine. It's a fun, funky girl. She's got tons of attitude. And I need to create a bold page or background for her. So I grab my homemade swirl stamp, and I'll put a link to the video where I show how I make these. And I'm stamping with black paint. I'm applying the black paint with a makeup sponge, and I'm just stamping this onto my 5x7 mini planner. This is an old Happy planner that I've repurposed. And on this particular one, you can see some patterning underneath there. There was some color and pattern, and I didn't like it. It didn't fit my needs. So I just did a coat of gesso, and I'm ready to go. So I'm just giving this a quick dry. My hope is that when I apply the color, I'm still going to see these bold patterns. Now I'm using quinacridone magenta, and I'm only sticking to that color. Now the makeup sponge that I'm going to apply this with, I'm applying a little more water in some places, a little less water, and that's going to give me some difference in the final colorization. I don't want it to be just one tone. So if I've gone over it with a little thicker paint, I get a darker color. If I use a little more water, I get a thinner color, and that gives me some variation in the background. I want this to match the focal image. She's full of attitude. I want this bold and bright. And I want the black in the background to match the black that's in her dress. So this stencil is Big Flower, and I thought, oh, I'm just going to remove the stencil through the paint through the stencil. Now, spoiler alert, you're not going to see a whole lot of this in the end, but it's a great technique to use to add interest to your background, and it kind of reverses the stencil, because you get no paint where the stencil was. And if I had left it at this stage, it would have given me an entirely different effect than my end product, but I could have. So I left this part in, even though in the final analysis you don't see a whole lot of it. Then I decide, I'm going to use the same stencil and now do some stenciling through it. So you have the positive and the negative of the stencil was with my hope. And if this was a different kind of page or a bigger page, a bigger stencil, I would have got a better effect using that technique. But I definitely will have to revisit this. This just it added texture and interest, but you don't get a whole lot of the patterning. So where I'm using one color, because I've pulled off some paint through the stencil and then I've stenciled through with another layer, you're getting some variations. And that's what it's all about, making it interesting. So I'm testing out the girl and I'm liking what I see. I like the swirls, they're wild and crazy, kind of like the attitude on this girl's face. And I grabbed this, I believe it's Little Diamonds, but I'll put a link to both stencils in the description box below if you want to check it out. This is a cake and cookie stencil, and while it's food safe, Needless to say, I won't be using it in the kitchen or to bake cookies and cakes. They are the perfect size for doing art, and I'm loving them for that. They're made of the same materials. Since I lost so much of that patterning, I just wanted to add a little bit more. Again, this focal image, she's so strong and she's got such attitude. I want to have a bold background for her. And by putting this layer on top, I'm pushing those swirls to the back, which I was finding they were they were competing a little too much with the focal image. Some places I didn't get it quite as bold white as I wanted it, so I'm kind of putting the stencil back on and adding another layer. Now I'm just cleaning my glass media mat, a spritz of the Murphy's oil soap, and the paint comes right off and cleans. So easy. I'm putting the girl on, and I'm liking this a little bit better because I want the focal image to be the focal image, not the swirls. And I picked a sentiment. It says, when something goes wrong, yell, plot twist, and move on. And that works, that applies for art journaling and mixed media. When it doesn't work out the way you want, just keep going. Add another layer, put more paint. Worst case scenario, you can gesso it all and start from scratch. Sometimes you win, sometimes you learn. Now, there was gold on the leg of the table. So I wanted to introduce that little bit of bling, that little bit of gold in the background. Here I'm actually doing black first, but I do come back and I add some gold for the reason that I just talked about. I'm edging this with black, keeping with my color scheme. And my color scheme here is one color, black and white, and then a little bling, because you need a little bling. One of the reasons I like doing the ICAD challenge and some of the challenges is it allows me to play. It may push me a little bit more to try new techniques, dig out some old supplies. And there I am finally. I knew I was putting the gold there. And that's how, you take the colors from the focal image. So I got the black. I decided to go bold because of the attitude of the girl. And when I go through my magazines, those are the kind of people that I cut out where there's some expression, some different composition, something that's unique that I think is going to add to a page. You can almost see the words come out of her mouth. So I'm edging the sentiment with the black as well. And then I decide to put the girl at an angle. I've also gone in with the black paint and some black smaller swirls. I have multiple sizes. I'm just gluing that in. She's, going with the sentiments, yeah, when something goes wrong, yell plot twist. Well, obviously the table has moved or it's uneven. And yes, my image had ripped there. But by the time I glue it down, you can't tell the difference. Just putting gel medium underneath and on top. So once that is completely dry, I'm just flipping it over and I'm cutting off the excess. It's just easier to flip it to the other side. Now you're going to see where I've glued the girl, you have the hole punching from the Happy Planner, and people have asked, how do you get rid of that? Now if you had the Happy Planner punch, you could use that. But once it's completely dried, if you just take the X-Acto knife like I'm doing here, and you can cut it, but it needs to be completely dry, otherwise it'll rip, and you can just very easily cut out that shape so that you can put it back into your Happy Planner or disk system planner. So just very slowly and carefully remove the excess. So as I'm looking at the girl, I decide that, I want to do some shading to make her fit the background and stand out a little bit more. So I grab my woodless charcoal pencil and my blending tool here, Tortillon, I believe, and I'll put a link to those so you can see them at least. And I'm just shading around. Now the blending tool allows me to get really close up, gets the shading right next to the magazine picture that I wouldn't be able to do in other ways. And I don't want to use my Stabilo All pencil because I find with magazine paper it tends to absorb some of the liquid and discolor occasionally. Not all the time, but some of the time. So because I'm not going to varnish this, I don't, it doesn't have to be perfect. And this is where I love using my woodless charcoal pencil. And this woodless one, you can put it in a sharpener and get a point on it as well. Just adding more black to the edge, and it gives such a nice soft effect. All the different ways that you can shade, and every one gives a slightly different effect. So depending on what you're looking for, that's the one you go for. So there's my finished page. Thank you so much. Oh, I can't finish a page without outlining it with my fine line bottle. Thanks for joining me on my index card a day, create daily journey. Leave me a comment below. I answer every single comment. Enjoy.